And now I have the honor to present our next speaker here live from the studio. Her name is CHLOE Sanguinetti. Is that correct? Yes, that is. And she is being joined with her colleague Joyce Cohen. And both are part of a company called Entrecom. Entrecom is one of the founding partners at Co-Liv with Xavier that we showed you early in the morning. And it's a communications agency. They do a lot of things, but especially today, we wanted to pick their brain on understanding how to create a compelling pitch and story for co-living operators and co-living ventures. And so without further ado, leaving the stage to CHLOE.
So hi everyone, my name is CHLOE, and today we're going to talk a bit about conversations and storytelling. But before we do this, I'll give you a little bit of context. So in the world that we live in today, it's never been easier to talk to each other. We've never had that many opportunities to freely express our opinions, or as many tools as we have today to actually share what we think. But yet what we can clearly see is that sharing ideas has never been more complicated. People fear the media, they remain in their comfort zones, in their bubble where everyone thinks like them. And more than that, the world is also filled with information and way too much content. So in the middle of all of this, brands find it hard to make themselves heard. And that's a context that we had anticipated 30 years ago when Entrecom was founded. It was then the very beginning of social networks. And while we thought that these networks would be a step towards collective projects and a more interesting democratic debate, what we see today is that they've also created huge gaps between people and communities. And we feel at Entrecom that we need to bring back conversation in the sense of people sharing ideas rather than opposing them, people coming together rather than confronting each other. And it's on this core idea that Entrecom was created, and it's been at the heart of everything that we do since then. So that's why today we're actually happy to welcome this summit here at the Maison de la Conversation. Most of you are joining us digitally, but the Maison de la Conversation is a shared community space. It's an accelerator for social innovation, and it's a place that brings people together from different backgrounds to facilitate conversations within communities. We've also been a member of Co-Liv France since the beginning, and we've been supporting actors of co-living with their communication strategies because we share so many of the same values. And so the question that we want to explore with you today is how you can create a compelling co-living venture pitch and story. And to answer this question, we'll look at it just like a series with 3 seasons and 9 episodes. So season 1. At the beginning of most co-living projects, you'll need to win a call for project or a bid or a tender. And in 2019, we did a study on the expectations of 50 of the biggest stakeholders that were taking part in the consultations called Inventing the Bigger Paris Metropolis, which is the largest urban and architectural consultation in Europe. Every single one of these stakeholders said that conversation was crucial. If a group answering the tender didn't have a conversation with their communities beforehand, they could really tell. Or if a real estate developer hadn't consulted with local actors beforehand either, they could also tell. So in this season of our series revolves around these conversations. And the characters that will come into play in this season are the final decision maker, an actor from your territory which supports your project, and one who is against. The project director, a local influencer, your final buyers, and a storyteller. This brings us to season 1, episode 1, which we've called Talk to Me. So one of the first considerations when you set up a co-living space is its location and how it's going to blend into its environment, or how your space and its residents are actually going to co-live with the territory that they're based in. And to define this, there needs to be a listening phase. So there are many tools for this at your disposal. You have traditional ones like one-on-one interviews and focus groups, and you can pair them today with active social listening, micro-listening applied to a territory, interviews and trend reviews. This listening time is actually crucial because it's going to enable you to identify influencers or ambassadors for your project on your territory. You're going to be able to understand the neighborhoods that you're implementing your space in, the themes that the local stakeholders support, and finally, you're going to be able to map out the competition and the local expectations. Based on this research, so this active listening phase, you'll then be able to move on to the next episode, which is episode 2 of season 1, which we've called What's the Story About? This is where you're going to start co-constructing the story of your co-living space based on your previous research. So because you actually do need to tell a story, you need to tell people what your space is going to be, what it will be to them, and what it's going to be to the territory. So a strong story is going to enable you to embark local communities on your project to make them feel included. Because the best storytelling that you can have around a real estate project is one in which your prospect can actually see themselves. So using design thinking tools, this is where you're going to filter everything that you've learned during your listening phase. You can organize creativity sessions with your team during which you're going to build the foundations for your story and for the conversation that you want to have with your audience, one that's going to embark people on your project and in the long run. So now that the foundations for your story are set, this brings us to episode 3 of season 1, which we've called Let's Design It. So telling the story of your co-living project is like telling the story of a great saga or a great series, with the introduction of different characters along the way, some disruptive elements and obstacles. It's a story that evolves with time and context. So in this episode, the tools at your disposal are the traditional marketing tactics, but associated with the main principles of narrative writing, from ideation to mind mapping, to design fiction, sorry. You can use creativity all along the way to build the best story to serve your project. And once the common thread for your story is set and the narrative is constructed, then the branding and the visual identity of your project should come naturally. And this brings us to season 2. So often the start of season 2 is the most dreaded phase of a project. It's the one where you've won your project, you're waiting for your building permit to be issued, but critics of the project start making themselves heard. So something that we haven't mentioned so far is that your listening phase, so season 1, also enables you to anticipate arguments against your project. All the obstacles that might arise or all the things that the local community might go against once you're actually ready to build. So the ambassador that you'll have embarked with you to support your project in season 1 are going to become crucial to bring people together around your project in season 2. So basically, if season 1 of your project has gone well, so should season 2. And the new characters that are going to be introduced in the seasons are the architect, the local influencer, the representative of your final target audience, and a conversation designer. So in this first episode of the second season, you're going to organize public meetings and consultations, which is why we've called it Let's Talk. These conversations can take place off and online on a dedicated platform, for example. These are the spaces in which the conversations are going to shed light on potential disagreements. It's going to bring first obstacles, but it's also going to bring first victories. This is also the time when new alliances might be formed. This brings us to episode 2. So now that you're aware of potential obstacles to your project, you'll be able to actually redefine it. This episode, which we've called Let's Move, is a crucial turning point when it's sometimes necessary to change your project according to reactions, risks, and opportunities. So the context in which you'd started your project initially might have changed. So now's the time to actually make it evolve and so that it fits with expectations. Here again, you're going to need to actively listen and consult with key actors. Based on this conversation, you can refine your initial strategy, adapt it to the field, and to all the different profiles of your stakeholders. So in the next episode, episode 3, you welcome your community to present your project, which is why we've called it Welcome. In a physical space, you can welcome them in a physical space like the project house, where people can come and go and ask questions and get information, or online on a dedicated platform again. This space is going to enable you to present your project, to inform, to share ideas, to organize workshops, through which you might discover small details that might make all the difference. So for example, a charging station for electric bikes that might be available to all, a gym rather than a cinema, or public speaking workshops. This is the time where you truly understand the needs and the expectations of the local community, and you respond to them. Only one group of new characters introduced in the season, and it's your sales partners. So that leads us to season 3. Season 3 is the operational part. is when your project is almost finished. In episode 1 of this season, which we've called Communities Are Key, you're ready to market your space, a space which perfectly matches the expectations of target communities. And to make sure that it actually does, our conversational strategy at this stage is to use marketing approaches to truly target your audiences through observation, social listening, or the analysis of their media usage. So in episode 1, that you've defined and you've detailed each profile of the different people in your community. Now's the time to adapt your story to each of them. That's why we've called this episode, Our Story is Your Story. Because you're not going to use the same arguments to convince everyone of the attractivity of your project. So some people might be won over by the public speaking workshops that you're going to be offering, or while others might be more interesting in the coffee shop that you're going to be opening to the public. So you need to adapt your story, you need to make sure that you tell it at the right time and through the right channel. So this leads us to season 3, episode 3, which is the last episode. So now you've set solid foundation all through this series to be ready to sell your project. So it's only logical that we would call this episode Go For It. This is when you're going to combine conversation to the best sales techniques using social selling, local micro-influence, or the use of conversational devices built for the short or long run. Your project is now ready to start truly living and existing and in the long run. So that leads us to the end of our series. We hope it will be useful. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, now's the time.
So much. Thank you so much, Chloe, for sharing all of your advice and especially all of your strategy that you are applying in order to create this entire pitch, starting with mapping out all of the actors into really going to creating the stories. So if people want to get in touch with you, we're going to drop the link into the Zoom. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.